This episode of the Citadel Cafe is brought to you by listeners like you. Visit patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe to find out how you can become a patron and help make this show possible. This is the Citadel Cafe, episode number 357. We're getting up there. Wednesday, April 15th is today. It's 2020, and my name is Joel Duggan, and the Citadel Cafe is where my friends and I hang out to talk about the geeky stuff that we are into. Joining me this week from home is Brockett Vola, and you can find him at the CatVolver on social media, and follow the hashtag #TheApeKingGeorge for some at-home hilarity. Hello, sir.
Thank you. I like how you said at home, but the irony is we've always been social distancing. So
Yes.
It's very nice that you're like, but podcasters understand this situation, and we will continue to stay diligent and never set foot outside of our living room or put pants on.
Now that
This is what we do.
Now that the dust has settled with the worldwide adjustments to the COVID-19 pandemic, and I think the initial stress wave is sort of over for a lot of people. It's become a new normal, essentially. It's been a couple of weeks now in Canada. And I'm starting to get, now that people have got themselves and their immediate family sorted, I'm starting to get friends reaching out to say, hey, how are you? Like, how are you doing through all this? Which is lovely. And I've been doing the same. I've been checking on people that I haven't talked to in a little while and just kind of like seeing where everybody is. But my go-to joke is just like, well, I've discovered that my lifestyle of choice has a name: social distancing. It's like, this is what I do all the time. And it's in a way, it's been a good thing for me because my work, thankfully, hasn't really changed that much. Podcasting and the content creation that I do and artwork and working from home, my livelihood has not been affected yet. I say yet. What stresses me out right now in the current situation is economic change. And we're too far away from the fallout and the shift and the adjustments to really know what's going to happen. So the uncertainty there I find stressful. So that's where I am with it. But I feel like with the community, with my podcast, the Spawn Chunks I do with Johnny, and with this show, and the community on the Discord, personally, I've noticed that we've been doing a really good job of just like, if people need to talk about stuff, they can find a space to do it. But we've been trying to focus more on like, here's a bunch of things that you can do to escape. You know, like here's a bunch of cool stuff that you can do to escape. And you have been doing this, the Ape King George hashtag, similar to your Candy of This Day hashtag, for some little fun social media clips. So to fill me in, like what's Ape King George?
Oh, it was a bit and Laura's pointed this out to me, so I'll give her credit up front. Laura messed with some Tinker Toys of Emerson's and made like a little chair. And then we have a tiny little Curious George like doll, stuffed animal.
Stuffy. Yeah.
Which Emmy, I love that you call it a stuffy. So it's a tiny stuffy. And then Emerson doesn't really use it that much. There's a lot of other toys she's actively playing with, but she's getting more into dolls. So it's out. And I just threw it in the chair because it fit perfectly. And then I took a picture of it. And then I made a Planet of the Apes joke about it. And then the next day, Laura put one of Emerson's crowns from her first birthday, these little plastic crowns, on his head. And then I made a joke about that the next day. And then by that point, usually when I hit a third idea, 3's a pattern, then I was like, all right, I'll throw a hashtag on this, and then it'll give me something mentally, creatively to throw around, because I'm not actively doing a lot of writing right now. I'm sort of brainstorming when I'm helping put Emerson to bed. Like there are moments where I'm like, she's fine, she's safe. But I'm like zoned out, just letting her babble and do whatever she's doing with like pillows and her stuffies. And then she'll snuggle up and tuck herself in and all these sort of cute things. And meanwhile, I'm like plotting out like, all right, and what was this plot point and what would I do? And so when I get a chance, she goes down, I quickly try and remember all those bits, and then I send those notes to myself to then put in my overall note document. And that's how I actually got through some stuff recently anyway. So it was fun to just do this little hashtag dumb thing. I'm not a Planet of the Apes fan, so I think probably some people were like, oh man, maybe that's why he's doing it. And it's like, no, not really. If anything, I'm such a nerd that like, and I've read this for certain artists. I think Robert Kirkman said this about his the trade volumes for Invincible, his superhero comic, and that once they designed the fronts and that every trade would basically be named after an old TV show, he had to have every single trade named after an old TV show, and the fronts had to look generally the same. Like they had to have some clip, some art. So like, and he's just nerd like that. And I'm the same way. Like I have the Dark Tower series, and because they're all dispersed in second, third, fourth, well, they're not first or second edition. So whatever they are, like I have 4 of them in paperback that are like with certain designs and colors and whatnot. And then there's these giant, enormous versions of them. And the fact that they like are all inorganically next to each other in a row, it just bothers me. Whereas like when you buy one of those in a box set ahead of time, they're all perfectly like, they're all, if you buy Harry Potter now in all 7, they'll have made every single one of them look vaguely the same.
Yeah. Like the throughput on the design. I think my Hobbit copy is out of the sequence, but I have the small pocket paperback versions of the Lord of the Rings, and they're all the black cover with the colored ring, and I think it's like yellow for Fellowship. I think it's red for the Two Towers, and I think it might be green for the Return of the King. I can't really remember, but they all look the same on the shelf. And I've often thought to myself that I'd love to have a much bigger like hardcover version where they've all got like a nice set throughput right from the Hobbit, and even get like the extra stuff as well. I don't know if I'd ever read the other books, but I certainly won't rereading The Hobbit unless I have kids in the future. But I have thought about rereading The Lord of the Rings at some point. But then I think about all the singing, and I think, no, I want to watch the movies instead. Yeah. So that's cool. Like to me, I'm also not a big Planet of the Apes fan, but I could see the immediate association because George is a monkey. And I think that I was also thinking like Lord of the Flies. I was waiting for like there to be a pencil with I mean, it's a little bit grim, but like a Pez dispenser head or something. I feel like it could be used.
Oh, I see. I have never read Lord of the Flies. It's the one of those, that Catcher in the Rye, and I'm sure there's a couple other, but like was truly classic, American book list.
Yeah. For us, it was required. It was required reading. I think it was grade 7 or 8. We had to. I think everybody that I know my age read it because that was what we read in school that year.
Yeah, I don't know what we did do. To Kill a Mockingbird was required reading at one point. We had The Awakening, which was miserable. Poisonwood Bible when I was in high school. That's the ones. Oh, Great Gatsby. We had to do that. Scarlet Letter. Ironically, both To Kill a Mockingbird is my wife's favorite book, and she doesn't pick a lot of favorites. And then my wife and I own 3 copies of The Great Gatsby, which is a book I hated as a young person, and now I love.
Oh, really?
Like, it's so fascinatingly, I don't know. I just think it's brilliant. The only thing I don't love is sort of the ending just doesn't have as much oomph as like the general story. But then again, I mean, we're talking about a different time. Like sometimes you rewatch an old movie and you'll be like, and by old, I'm sorry, I'm not talking about the 80s. I know some people might be like, oh, that's an old movie. All the jokes from Spider-Man aside, hey, do you guys see this really old movie about blah, blah, blah? And you're like, oh my God, shut up, kid.
Yeah.
But that's how you feel. I'm talking about like 1940s or 50s where like sometimes you're just like, so the whole plot of this movie was just basically people talking for a long time. And then in the last 20 minutes, they make a choice. Like, and that was riveting to some people in drama. Whereas now it's like, Aaron Sorkin style, where like people are talking, but they're walking and then they're cutting between things. And like, and I think one of the biggest things I've noticed from old films to new films is heist movies, which I love, are dramatically different in the old days because it's like a slower pace. It's like, the person waits outside the bank, and then maybe there's a little tension. But then the new days is like they cut to like 5 people's faces all at once, and then they got a car driving in the background, and then they got like the way they edit it is so much more Michael Mann, and it's more manic and chaotic. But heist films back in the day just felt very like, all right, A, B, C, back to B, back to A.
Yep.
And it's not bad at all. And there's certainly excellent films of all eras, but it's just interesting. You can really see how styles will change. And so filmmakers, or at least editors, and the whole institution will sort of mimic what is the next biggest thing. And then, all the films kind of look like that for a little while.
I know exactly what you mean because, and I'll tease this now. I watched a film from 27 years ago this weekend, and I'm going to talk about it here on the show a little bit later. But just to kind of let that sink in for you listeners that might be around my age, if you're plus 30, I'm 40, soon to be 41. But if you're in that 30 to 40 range, and I'm telling you now that this movie is 27 years old, once I get around to talking to you about it, you'll be like, "Wait, what?"
I was about to say, I had to do the quick math, and I know it. I'm like, 27, Joel, you're wrong. I was like, no, I'm about to turn 34 next week, so obviously yes.
Exactly right.
Obviously, whoops.
Yeah, so I want to follow up quickly, actually. Last week, after I was speaking with Lou, he was listening to the D&D episode that I had with Megan and Johnny a few weeks ago, and he actually passed along a D&D resource from there's a Polygon article we'll have linked here in the show notes, and basically Wizards of the Coast, publishers of Dungeons and Dragons, are sharing daily free content to support folks cooped up at home. So far, supplements appear to be reprints of materials that were previously available for free, but later this week, I think when was this article made? Like a week and a half ago, something like that. So actually just a week ago. So right now there should be more available for free content. It's not a lot, but it's enough to get you going. So if you're curious about trying something like Dungeons and Dragons or other tabletop things at home, then this is an excellent way to get in there because there's some free content that you can try before you invest in like a big rule book or anything like that. Basically, they have a PDF of some things that you can download that will be the rules and enough to kind of get you going. Just to kind of test out the experience, which I thought was a really, really cool resource. Also, I want to say, was it last month? I feel like last month, Wouter, a friend of mine and member of the community on the thevoyagersworkshop.com. I always struggle to remember his URL correctly, but thevoyagersworkshop.com. His March newsletter was basically like a Cole's Notes for here's 4 tabletop RPGs that you might want to try. I think it was like Call of Cthulhu, Tales from the Loop, Dungeons and Dragons, and then one of the Star Wars ones. And he just kind of has like this little kind of like 2-paragraph summary of what to expect and what you might want to get out of an RPG tabletop experience. And it was a great article. I was catching up on a bunch of email yesterday, and I finally got around to reading it. So thevoyagersworkshop.com. I try to plug that as much as I can because it's a fun website, especially for people that are either just trying to do more board game stuff to be a little bit more around the table with friends and family as opposed to video games. But then also now, people are struggling to do more online via FaceTime and remote stuff. But it's hard if not everybody on your friends list is going to be a gamer, or if they are, they're not going to be in the same video games. So this kind of stuff is a little bit more personal, and it's much slower paced. It's very chill. And that's something that I like about the tabletop experience. So
I'm going to play some tonight.
Nice. Very, very cool. I keep on meaning to try and find an online D&D thing. This spring, one of the things I wanted to do, not really as a New Year's resolution, but just as a way to kind of see friends more. I just wanted to host and potentially do like a tabletop thing. But then, of course, everything changed. So that's not happening anytime soon. But it's on my list for maybe 2021. So I'll have a list.
It's a lot of fun.
I'll have a link to this Polygon article in the show notes, and I'll also do a link to Wouter's website as well. And
nice.
We don't have an email per se this week, but Brockett, you're finally going to come to terms with the challenge that you put out to everybody else about the Nerd Mount Rushmore.
Well, my first instincts were Superman and Indiana Jones, and I think I shared that in the email, but unfortunately I've kicked Indiana Jones out. And I'll explain why, because I went so, even hearing you and Megan talk about it, and even listening to my own worlds back and blah, 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 all this sort of stuff, more stuff got brought up because of it. So I wanted to generally reestablish mine. It felt cruel to set such a apparently difficult challenge. I thought it was kind of fun, but then I also enjoyed how much wrestling you guys seem to do. So
It was a
anyway,
fun email. Like I want to have more stuff like that on the show. I think it was just a fun conversation.
So I have some of these you might be familiar with, Joel. I bet you're familiar with 2 out of the 3. I doubt. Okay, well, I'll go through. So first and foremost is still Superman. He's my favorite character. However, he would be drawn by Max Fleischer from the old
Nice.
Max Fleischer cartoons. Now, this was a cartoon, all those cartoons, which now are like free or like $1.
Yeah.
Like you could see them in like the waste bin, and I'm like, holy crap, that would have blown my mind as a kid, because I had 4 VHSs, and they're not very long, but this is back in late 80s, early 90s, almost 27 years ago. And they only had like 2 cartoons on each tape, which is mind blowing, because that means there were like sub 40 minutes for just VH. Anyway, I watched like several of them, and I've just always enjoyed that art style. I even kind of like the shorter cape. I don't mind the black S and whatnot.
I'm gonna make sure that people aren't too confused. Your VHS tapes were from the late 80s. The cartoons were made in the 40s.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Just so people are on board.
Oh, and that's a very important note to note, because also amongst those Max Fleischer are wartime films and incredibly racist films. So
very much so.
You have to stay away from Japators, which you can only imagine who they slander in those. Yep. And the 11th Hour, I think, is also political and sort of racist. Not sort of racist. Tribal Drums is fairly racist. And I think I'm missing one other one. But things like the Silver Bullet or it's not the Midnight Express, but there's a train one. I mean, the original, the one that's just called Superman, or AKA the Mad Scientist. That one's still probably my favorite. It's the one I watch the most, especially when he gets shot with a beam of energy. And then it keeps hurting him and bouncing him back. And then at some point, he just all of a sudden is just like stops and then just starts punching the energy back and then like flying through the air. It's one of the dumbest scientific things I've ever seen, while also being the coolest thing that when I think of Superman, like that's one of my childhood visions. I just love, and I remember doing that as a kid. Like anytime there was running water, I'd just be like punching the water to like get closer, because I was like, Superman could do it. So
and they did that in Superman. Not Returns, Superman, Man of Steel. They did in the Man of Steel movie. The force that he's pushing against is technically gravity, because the terraforming machines are trying to change the Earth's gravitational poles. But the light that he's in, he's essentially punching up and flying up through a beam of light.
I did forget that.
Light, like it's one of the better. It's one of the better moments in that film, actually.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that's like really well embraced. So, and Superman, it's not only from my childhood, not only my favorite character, but superhero and comic books. And I also sort of try to empathize with a lot of the teachings of Superman, again, through the lens of common sense and quality control. Back in the 40s, Superman would tell you certain things that you probably wouldn't want to follow nowadays, but that's just how it goes. And so the second person on my Mount Rushmore is Donald Duck from the Kingdom Hearts video games. And this is specifically because Donald represents my favorite Disney character for the most part. He also is a magician in those video games, and it's a video game. And I just love that series. It's an RPG, love RPGs, and Square Enix made it with Disney Interactive, and I really like Square Enix. So that kind of covers all of that. And the design for his mage character is pretty cool. It's really cute how he has like his basic staff before you change it, like has a little sorcerer head with a little sorcerer cap on. It's just really cool. They did a good job with him. Goofy's design's also kind of cool in there, but I just generally love Donald more, and I thought he was really cool because he did all the magic stuff for your party. Third, I have Faye Valentine from Cowboy Bebop anime. To represent anime, to represent the music from that show, which is amazing. to represent crushes I've had in my life on fictional characters and or real people, but mostly I guess on fictional characters, because Faye Valentine's still one of those, like, for some Jessica Rabbit or
Right.
I don't know,
Yeah.
whoever, but I just always loved Faye Valentine. And it's a space Western, so it kind of crosses off two different genres too that I enjoy. And it's a crew of really diverse and interesting characters. And before all this, I think they were still working on the live action Netflix adaptation. So if you're unfamiliar with the anime, which is a big shame, it's only 26 episodes in a movie. And it's quite good. It's adult, so it's not a.
Would you suggest starting with the series or the movie?
Oh, absolutely, series. The movie technically you could call like 5 or something. It's like late series, supposedly. If you wanted to, you could definitely just watch the movie to see if you like the characters, because the characters get introduced over the course of the series, whereas the movie gives you everybody up front.
Right.
But there are things they reference in the movie that you'll have a better idea about the world building if you watch through the series.
Watch the series, nice.
Yeah. But it's a lot of fun. And then lastly is just Cthulhu from H.P. Lovecraft. I was trying to wrestle with somebody who could draw him. And I just never settled on anybody, so I didn't pick anything. But there's a lot of different artists who have drawn Cthulhu, both very pseudo-realistic and then chibi, and like it's just a funny character to see in different ways like that. But if you're not familiar with Cthulhu, that's very strange. But he's probably the most popular of all the elder gods, old ones, Lovecraftian monsters, the squid face thing with wings, basically. And that represents the spooky stuff I'm more into. It also represents old-timey serial style adventures and mysteries, because a lot of the Lovecraft stories are kind of, they go to an exotic place and they discover this cult or whatever. And so that's kind of how it bumped out Indiana Jones. Now, I know there's some fanfics out there of like Indiana Jones versus Cthulhu and that sort of things, and I've never read that, but I've always been interested in more occult. Like Six Gun is a really cool comic that was an occult Western, which I really loved. And then so it's like occult adventure stuff is sort of what you get from some Lovecraft stories. So so that would be my monument and whatnot for Nerd Rushmore. It took me, honestly, once I thought hard about it, probably took 35 minutes or so, but like I juggled with like the Faye Valentine slot because I really wanted to get a good anime character in there. But unfortunately, I either was going to pick an anime character I was picking just because I wanted to represent that show, or I was going to pick an anime character that I felt like overlapped too much. Like, don't want any My Hero Academia because they're superheroes that touch the Superman. So I went with Faye Valentine because she fit that sort of cool space bounty hunter.
Try to be a little bit more diverse.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And if you think about it, I got one white dude, one white lady, a duck, and then a horrible monster. So, I mean, I tried to, I don't want to sell Donald short, but I mean, of all these things, he's probably, I don't know. He might not be the most underpowered.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
So there you have it.
Very cool. Glad to finally have that all sorted out. I will have links to all that kind of stuff on the show notes as well. Now it's time to go way, way back. And I mean, before I even graduated high school, I saw this movie in theaters in 1993, and I watched it this weekend. First time I've seen it in a very long time. I'm sure I've watched it on DVD or something. I feel like when my buddy Chad and I got into having surround sound systems as adults, we eventually watched a lot of our favorites, and this was one of them. But it was on, what was it on? I think it was on Amazon Prime Video for me in Canada. Jurassic Park. The original. So not Jurassic World, Jurassic Park with what's his name? Grant, and I'm trying to remember. I'm mixing characters' names and actors.
So Sam Neill is Grant.
Sam Neill, Laura Dern, Jeff Goldblum is the guy I was trying to remember.
Jeff Goldblum,
I'm not sure why I was blanking.
Richard Attenborough,
Richard Attenborough, of course.
Yeah.
So yeah, this, and directed by Steven Spielberg, and I was listening to a podcast about tech and paleontology that made me think of dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. And so that's what led me to watching this weekend. And I've recently watched the Jurassic World's films. So I didn't want to go back and watch those straight away because it's been like less than a year since I saw the last one, I think. But it has been eons, pun included, pun intended, that since I watched the original Jurassic Park. And just like you were saying earlier in this episode, wow, films have a different pace now compared to even 20, 25 years ago. Like, it was very much like just this happened and then this happened, and you were going from important scene to important scene to important dialogue. Like, there was very little fluff. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm trying to actually remember off the top of my head how long the movie is. It doesn't really say on IMDb, I don't think. Um, no, 2 hours and 7 minutes. But with most movies, especially with most Marvel movies now, hitting like 2.5 hours. Endgame was 3 hours plus. Like, all this kind of stuff. Like, I'm having a movie that's concise is different. I also feel like they just kind of the visual language of setting up who the villain is with body language and with music. Obviously, Jurassic Park scored by John Williams, which is phenomenal. But like, there's a lot of film like communication tropes, and they're not tropes you necessarily notice, but like the moment that Nedry comes on screen, even though I've seen the movie before, you just know he's the bad guy. Like, you just know that
Yeah.
he's a complete douche knuckle, and
Yeah.
you're gonna have to deal with this guy because he's that kind of archetype, right? Like, he has that look. They shoot him a certain way. The music is a certain way. All this kind of stuff. Like, for example, you cut to a scene where I don't remember his name. Dotson is delivering the
That's a
can of shaving cream with the
shaving cream.
coolant
Yep.
inside to so Nedry can steal the embryos. And as soon as the briefcase is on screen, the music completely shifts to villain. Like, it's just like, this is the plot, you know, and it's so it's very very obvious, and everything just feels, I don't want to say mechanical, but like almost everything that the characters do are pushing the plot forward. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that it's an interesting change from so much of the fluffy dialogue that we see in a lot of modern television and a lot of modern film, where the dialogue is, you're spending a lot of time with modern films, modern TV especially. A lot of dialogue is spent explaining the plot to you, whereas in Jurassic Park, what's said is not explaining what's going on. What's said is like reacting to what's going on, and then what do we do next? Like, the dialogue and the action of what's happening. Because half the time, the scientists, Sam Neill and Laura Dern, so Grant and Ellie, are so baffled by what's going on, seeing dinosaurs for the first time alive on the planet, that they don't complete their sentences. So there's no pandering to the audience, because like anything that's coming out of their mouth is essentially babble. It's in some points, where they're just like, I just don't, I just, this shouldn't, and then you get the impression of what, this shouldn't exist or this shouldn't be possible, and then they go through and they tour the park and stuff, and it was really enjoyable. Visually, it didn't hold up because, well, two reasons, and I'm going to lay this at the foot of Prime Video. Prime Video in Canada quality is shit. It is,
Ugh.
oh my god, it's terrible. If it doesn't stutter 4 times in the course of a movie, I'm surprised.
Oh no.
Several times the audio continues, but the movie has just stopped visually.
Hmm.
So the scene with the Gallimimus running over the field and being chased by the Tyrannosaur, like, all
Oh.
the audio is happening, and I had to stop it, rewind it by 5 minutes, and play again, and then wait for 30 to 45 seconds while this pixelated garbage sorted itself out, and then went
Yeah.
to. And this is not because of all the people at home right now. This has been true of Amazon Prime ever since I've had it. Ever since I've had Prime Video, it just does not work that well. Um,
Uh,
so yeah, so I that was frustrating. But just in general, it's shot on film. I don't think it was a digital film movie, and the original print is just not that high res. And so what I was watching on Prime Video was was 1080p, but probably upscaled from whatever VHS it would have been released on. I don't think it was released on DVD at first. I think it probably came out on VHS. That's how old the film is. And
Yes, correct. Yeah.
yeah, and as a result, there are some moments, and I'll get into the special effects in a bit, but there are some moments when they're like walking up the front stairs to uh to enter the main building. Like you're outside and you see them pull up in the jungle. They're on whatever location they're at. They're very clearly outside. There's trees everywhere. And they pull up these Jeeps to this outside building. And then the next scene is them walking up the stairs and you go, wow, that's a sound stage. Like that is a dark building with white lights, and that is not where they just were. Like it is just like a smack in the face. And you don't notice that about most stuff these days because of all the special effects and all the like the post processing and color grading and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure that all happened in 1993, but the tech just wasn't there. And it's rough. There are some points where you're just like, wow, I just got completely pulled out of Jurassic Park because of that. And surprisingly, you'd think it would be the dinosaurs. You think it would be the CG of the dinosaurs or the animatronic, because there's a lot of like real physical animatronic dinosaurs in the film that would pull you out of it. And really, they're not. It's more the quality of the lighting and the resolution of the images that pulls you out. That some of the animatronic dinosaurs are better than others. You don't really think about the T-Rex or the raptors very much as anything other than just monsters. Like they it's such a good it's made so well with those particular dinosaurs that it really sort
Yeah.
of you lose yourself in the story at that point. But like the Dilophosaurus, it's like it's stiff. Like when it moves its head, the head is the only thing that moves. Like
Yeah,
the arms might go up and down on hinges, like, and that's it. Like it's rough. It's
when
not the
it
best.
does the I don't know if it's a fan or crown or whatever
Mhm.
you want to call the sort of
The
umbrella
frill,
thing.
yeah,
Yeah, it pops in such a like hydraulic, like ooh poosh, and
it's
then
like an
jerk
umbrella.
jerk 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 jerk. Yeah, exactly. And then you're like, man, if nature was like that, it would be even more terrifying. Like if
Yeah,
you saw like a cobra head just sort of mechanically like expound, it's you'd be like, I'm even more terrified of you
yeah,
instead of the natural like whatever. But yeah,
yeah,
I can see that. Yeah, it's
yeah.
funny.
And just like there's so much of those sequences that I felt like Jurassic Park when I saw it felt much bigger, but watching it back now, the island sets and the distance that Nedry travels to try to get to the docks and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't feel long at all. It feels like he goes
No.
down a driveway and drives off the side of it. Like it's like
Yeah.
it doesn't feel like he's driving for miles or speeding at gross speeds. Like it's all because those are the kind of things that in new films, if there's a car crash, like it's CG and they throw the thing off a 40-foot cliff. Like here he drives down an embankment, when he gets stuck, like so a lot of the writing tends to be kind of like stuff that is feasible, in terms of what the tech was available, the stunts that were available, budgets, all that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Whereas now they're just kind of like, it's Jurassic Park. We're basically printing money. So let's have everybody be in a gyro ball and throw them off a 200-meter cliff with a bunch of dinosaurs raining down. Like there's all these different things that happen in the new Jurassic World films that just take Jurassic Park and kind of like stand it on its head. But you absolutely still get the sense that the T-Rex is the star of the show.
Yeah.
The acting from everyone involved is good in like a 1993 cartoonish kind of way for the bad guys and for like the supporting cast like Jeff Goldblum. But then the fear and the astonishment of like we're looking at a T-Rex for the first time. Like doesn't matter who's on screen. Whenever that happens, it's really believable. Like
Yeah.
and they do such a great job of cutting between the CG T-Rex like coming through the paddock fence and stomping around to then the animatronic T-Rex that's like bashing through the roof of the car trying to eat the kids. And
Yeah.
like it's such a quick back and forth that it really does sell it. And you don't at all think about those moments as you're not trying to break it down. you're there going like, okay, this is iconic. I remember this experience from when I was watching it in the theater. I remember going with a bunch of friends, bunch of dudes that all hung out in like grade 7 or 8, I think. Must have been grade 8. But because we were late or because it was a brand new film, we ended up sitting in like the fourth row. And it was not my favorite way to see a movie these days, but to see Jurassic Park in the fourth row, like you kind of had that larger than life experience. Like when that foot comes down from the T-Rex and the calf muscle kind of flexes, you're like, oh my
Yeah.
God, like this is huge. And
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
really fun at that point. So I had a lot of fun rewatching it. I would encourage people to check out some of these things. Now, I don't know if I'm going to watch the whole series. I know I've seen Jurassic Park 3 and didn't hate it. I know I've seen Jurassic Park 2 and remember it sucks like a lot. So I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to go back to that. And I, even with the new films, the new Jurassic World films, the raptors are just so prominent. I kind of miss the focus on the T Rex. The
Yeah.
the raptors were important at the very end in terms of like it becomes a monster movie. The original Jurassic Park, it becomes like a horror film in the last bits with the kids in the kitchen and the raptors opening up the door and trying to hunt them down in the shiny metal kitchen. Um,
Yeah.
it's basically like an axe murder, like horror, sequence.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But
It's
yeah, but in the newer films, like there's so much focus on the raptors. It's just always raptor, raptor, raptor because they created this like super raptor. That's basically the plot. And I miss the focus on the T Rex. Like I wish that they had stuck with the T Rex as basically like the big bad in some ways. So I'm curious to see what they're going to do in the third Jurassic World film. Now that Fallen Kingdom has come out, the dinosaurs are off the island, and the world at large is going to deal with this new wildlife population of dinosaurs. And I'm very curious to see if there's going to be some close encounters with some larger predators. It doesn't have to be necessarily T-Rex, although that would be fun. But I know there's bigger things like Allosaurus and some other, things. But I didn't particularly like the way that they handled the bigger dinosaur in Jurassic Park 3. I don't remember the name of it, but it has like the fin on its back and it's got a really
yeah,
long
the giant
snout.
yeah.
It
The
it's just
new
it's kind
big
of
bad.
goofy. And
Yeah.
it's like while technically true, yes, it was a bigger predator than the T-Rex and all that kind of stuff. I kind of feel like because you're dealing with a situation where it's sci-fi, you're cloning dinosaurs and they're walking around. I kind of feel like one of the unexpected things that they could have happen is just have a T-Rex that just genetically ends up being bigger. Like just bigger. Not a
Yeah.
T-Rex and a raptor cross, genetically mutated, because then it just means like it's a slightly larger, really ugly raptor. It doesn't at all look like it. I didn't like I like the premise, but the visual design didn't really sit with me. I would much rather see just like give me a T-Rex that looks like it's on steroids. Like give me a T-Rex that's like 2 heads taller than the one from the original film and have it be like just monstrous. Like that to me would be fantastic. I'd love to see something like that. But so
Yeah.
I've gone on my little spiel here. What has it been a long time since you've seen the original Jurassic Park?
I think it's been a while. There's so many iconic things, and then trying to match up once I read the book, which was one of the few things I ever like read, and then also saw the movie of. I saw the movie first, and then the book much years later. But it's interesting because it felt like with the Jurassic Park, even before we did this whole superhero thing, and everyone's like, "Oh man, they gotta blow up a city, they gotta blow up a planet, they gotta blow up the universe." It always escalates, and people are so like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." Guess what? Jurassic Park franchise did that way back when. It was T-Rex was big bad. Who cares? Spoiler, whatever. Lost World, it was like 2 T-Rexes was the big whoa. Third Jurassic Park, it's the giant frail guy. Then the Jurassic World, they've got the super mutated, super T-Rex monster, and then the fifth one, it's another. So it's like they consistently just keep trying to run up each other with like more and more fictionalized, more and more ridiculous dinosaurs. So back to your point, it almost became by the end like the Raptors were like, yeah, they're kind of scary, I guess, but also we love Raptors. And then T-Rex was like, when T-Rex shows up now, it's kind of like you're seeing like an old wrestler. You're like, oh,
Yeah,
Hulk Hogan. Now you're one of my best. Now I nostalgically love to see you. And I
yeah.
know you can never beat The Rock because The Rock is fit and in his prime, and you're Hulk Hogan. But like, in your brain, you're like, I'll always have that sweet spot for that older, powerhouse. And that's the T-Rex. So now it's sort of interesting how T-Rex has aged to the point where maybe, I mean, it's still a big deal, I think, to like kids. But I think to adults now, T-Rexes are more like, oh, that's a cute T-Rex. I'm not as frightened of them.
I wonder. I can't remember what it does or which film it was in. Whether it was Fallen Kingdom or whether it was the. I think it had a place in Jurassic World as well. But Fallen Kingdom, I know there was definitely a money shot of they're running away from basically. Yeah, it was Fallen Kingdom because the volcano was going crazy and everybody was running down the hill and there's like dinosaurs everywhere. And they're basically about to be eaten or about to be trampled by something. And then the T Rex comes out of nowhere. And even though it's a predator, he essentially saves. Is it Owen? I think that is Chris Pratt.
Chris Pratt.
Yeah, I think his character's name is Owen. Um, so like he essentially the T Rex essentially saves him by it is Owen by eating whatever was about to eat him. Like it's like a raptor or something or an allosaur or something like that. And I just but that's the only shot you get. It's like this cameo instead of because they wanted to move on. They wanted the other raptor hybrid thing to be the big beastie thing that they were focusing on. But I I've liked the Fallen Kingdom and the Jurassic World movies. I didn't realize how much I liked them until I went back and started to watch Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park is it's just such an epic idea, and so like tip of my hat to Michael Crichton, who wrote the novel. Like it's such a cool idea. And to have a world be built in, to build your movie in this imaginative world. Like I'd love to see what I would love to see. I think they were called Dino Riders. I think it's an old cartoon. I think that was them. Yeah, Dino Riders.
I think that's it. Yeah.
They were toys when I was a kid. 1988 animated series, and basically it was a bunch of people that like were spacefaring humans, humanoids. And they landed on this planet that was essentially dinosaurs, or they went back in time to Earth. I don't really remember. But essentially, they had lasers. And so the bad guys all had weapons and like mechanical mounts on the back of carnivores. And then the good guys, the good people, they had all their like tank-like and mech-like attachments on the back of like stegosaurs and brontosaurus and all this kind of stuff. And the toys were awesome because like who doesn't want to put lasers on the head of a dinosaur? Like, yes, please, like sign me up. I mean, at that point I was 11, 9, something like that. So yeah, like I would love to see. I mean, if it was done with a new script and a new idea and maybe something a little bit more logical, because most 80s cartoons didn't really add up. But I'd love to see a modern version of something like that. I mean, we're not going to get it because the Jurassic World franchise is out there, but dinosaurs and lasers or something like that would be such a cool kind of like one up, for the next level of dinosaur film. I'm not sure when we're going to get one, but yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's and I mean, obviously it's Steven Spielberg. I mean, like it's a well-directed film. The music is phenomenal. It wraps up really quick. Like it's very much like an adventure film from like an Indiana Jones. Like they kind of like they wrap everything up in a nice little bow and then they send you on your way, and it's kind of over before you realize it's over. And I think that's one of the strengths of movies from the 80s and the 90s, that they were pretty succinct.
And Spielberg, I think, does a really good job. I'll always remember this review of the original the only one so far, Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is my favorite film. And they just said that like what Raiders did to the adventure film was they took you went from the pot into the fire, and then that fire rolled into a larger fire, and that fire went into a volcano. Like you just constantly flowed from one disaster situation or epic set piece to another, and it just did not let up. They're like, at one point, once it starts, it just goes. And Die Hard does this, and so many other films do this now. And you think about a lot of Marvel films, and really the fluff that's not in Jurassic Park now in Marvel films is just them making jokes. Like they just add way more humor
Right.
to situations, which I know bothers some people. And to some ways, I'm getting a little tired of some of it. But overall, like Jurassic Park is just one of those evergreen films. I think of like, sure, there are going to be stylistic things and some CGI stuff that might not be as well, but the characters and the wonder and a lot of the stuff is great. I think Sam Neill and Laura Dern still really nail back in the old days before the tennis ball was like an easy thing, quote unquote, easy thing
Yeah.
for actors to act with, which is like so not rare now. I think back in those days, it was still very rare to be like, all right, you look up and you see this thing, and like that person has to react to nothing, not even like, whatever. And they do a great job. And I
Yeah.
think the T-Rex sequence outside his paddock is one of those few sequences. And Spielberg has a lot of these. I mean, Raiders of the Lost Ark's desert chase is just one of those sequences I could just watch from start to finish at any point and any day. And the T-Rex scene at the paddock, I think, is one of those where it's just like a perfect balance of suspense and ratcheting up the horror. And then there's just a lot of really good cinematography and pacing and choice and that sort of thing. And I think when you have moments like that reverberate so hard with a generation or anybody who views these films, I think that's what really stands out and keeps it going and will be around. I think it may be naive to think it, but I think even with the sensibilities nowadays, Jurassic Park 1 will still hold a lot of clout and continue to sort of reign supreme as far as that series and possibly dinosaur films are in general. And I think that's for a good reason. I think there's a lot of stuff in it that is just still really works in the same way that Star Wars is even older than that.
Yeah.
And a lot of parts of Star Wars still really works because melodrama, excitement, adventure, they're just things that I think everybody at some level craves. Like we like our Mad Men, we like Breaking Bad, we like these shows, but then there's always, I mean, maybe you do, maybe you don't. But I feel like the moments that are around the water cooler the next day from Game of Thrones isn't, oh my God, did you see how that person like totally badmouthed the other person? Oh my God, that bad mouthing was so epic. It was more like, oh my God, did you see that person I thought they were going to get killed. And then instead they got killed. Oh my God. Like it's the slow burn, ratcheted up, boom, you get hit with something. And I think Spielberg was always amazing with that. Going back to Jaws, the Indiana Jones, Jurassic Park, like he's just always been really good at slow burning and then hitting you with something impactful. I honestly, I haven't seen a ton of his most recent stuff, but I even think of like The Adventures of Tintin, which was pretty much a flop, but there's so many parts of that film that I just found so freaking charming. And yeah, it's pretty clunky, and there's a cool scene that's far too improbable and goes on too long with a car basically rolling and fumbling through an entire city. But like in the moment when you're like, it's basically a high-end adventure cartoon, why not? Why not put lasers on dinosaurs? So at some point you're kind of like, what are we going to do? We're going to try and play to people who never wants to see dinosaurs. They think dinosaurs are dumb. Or do we want to play to the people who love dinosaurs and would like to see something different? And if you do it right, we'll really appreciate it. And that's sort of where you can find yourself with a lot of that stuff from the past.
So what have you been up to in the last few weeks?
Well, I would like to say I came with a lot of new stuff, but pretty much either Lou has brought up some of the things I've loved, which is hilarious because Lou's birthday just passed. My birthday's soon. So maybe there's something about April babies that are like Lock and Key and Castlevania and stuff. But I loved Castlevania season 3, by the way. Talk about slow burn. You really should watch that, Joel. I know you're not into horror.
It's on my list.
It's
it's on my list of like turn my brain off and watch some Netflix, but I haven't got there yet.
Talk about like a cocksure like lead. Like the lead, Trevor Belmont it's like he's that kind of grouchy, like I know about monsters, but like I'm so over them sort of thing. I don't know. It's good. It plays well. But what I've been most absorbed with, and I think way back on the Discord, I saw you had at least dabbled in the world of Borderlands, the video games. And like basically at that point, I would have decided to shut down my life and just absorb Borderlands with you for the first time if that was ever possible. But unfortunately, I could not. But I love the video game series Borderlands for all of its incredibly over the top, stupid jokes to its cartoonish cell shading. And I finally got to 3, which I know is far behind the times, but I have a child. So for me, I was excited to start playing it in March. And I've just been playing it a lot. It's been really fun. It's just I love RPGs, like I mentioned before. And I love sort of the dynamic that the new one brings, which is you can planet hop and the character's really cool. And it's just a fun game. It's a first person shooter RPG. You build up your character. You can play with up to 4 people, and it's just cool. I've just always really enjoyed the genre. The newest one doesn't add anything extremely huge as far as like, wow, we really just like brought this to a whole new level, like for our next console type of thing. But I didn't really mind. I like it, and a bunch of my friends are geeking out over Final Fantasy VII Remake, which yes, they updated all the graphics and changed a lot of stuff and added stuff. But at the same time, you basically are buying the core of a game you played a long time ago. And I've never been somebody who's been upset with that if the choice was, like somebody goes through and updates Jurassic Park. Like, yes, people want the original Star Wars trilogy without the Jabba in the Mos Eisley's. They don't want these things. And I understand that. And it makes total sense because some of it's gratuitous. But for me, sometimes it's like, I don't mind a new sheen. Like if you love a car, you don't just like let the engine completely garbage out. You don't just let it the AC die. Like you're trying to replace it, you can put a new coat of paint on it. And sometimes if you're not really destroying what the essence is, then I'm fine with some new shiny bits to it. So I've just pretty much felt that recently with some games and been like, I'll play this, I'll do that. I don't care how old it is, throwbacky it is, or whatever it is. But I've really enjoyed playing that game.
I tried to get in and play and complete Borderlands 2, which I liked but never did finish. And I think part of my issue was that I had to start from scratch again because I just either didn't remember the story or I didn't have access to my playthrough. And so I was playing for a while on my Mac on Steam. And I know I can bring that over to the PC now. I'm still having graphical issues with my PC, so first-person games are particularly hard in my head. I get a frame stutter motion blur thing that is not so bad for top-down stuff. Like I've been playing some Minecraft Dungeons, and there is still the blur, like you still see it, but because it's not a spatial thing, it's just like the background is being blurry when the camera moves around, whereas my character is just kind of like in the middle of the screen, swinging swords and killing zombies. Whereas in Minecraft or in Satisfactory, or I haven't tried a first person shooter, when you're moving around and looking with the mouse, it's very off putting. I get a headache in like 20 minutes. So I haven't been able to do it. I've also, I create a lot of content with Minecraft, or I was until about a week or two ago when my computer started giving me trouble. But what was I going to say? The Borderlands 2 thing, it's not like I didn't like the game. I just didn't have time to finish it. And I'm a bit of a completionist. And so the more guns and the more loot and the more story and the side stuff, like I was not going at Borderlands 2 like, let's go for a speed run and go straight through. It's like, no, I'm RPing this a little bit. Like I kind of want a better gun before I go down that way. I'm going to go do this side mission. And so it ends up taking me like forever to complete those games. But I really enjoyed Borderlands 2, and I've heard good things about Borderlands 3. It's on sale now. Like you can usually find it in like a Steam Spring Sale, or Epic Games has got a sale on right now. So depending on where you like to hang your hat, you might be able to find it. I don't know if it's out. Is it out on Xbox 3? Is it out on Xbox One?
Yeah, I have it for PS4. And it's on Xbox One as well.
Is it part of Game Pass? If it's part of Xbox Game Pass? Because that's like $1 a month right now, which is bananas.
You know what? I don't know, but the thing is, I remember when I had the PS3, and they have the PS Plus, which is free games or whatever. I think it was only about like 2 years removed, and they gave you all of Borderlands 2, just the base game for free.
Right.
And it was only 2 years removed, and it's like, sometimes with those things, I'm like, man, I can't believe like somebody got my $60 game like for. But it was 2 years later, and I understand, blah blah. But like at the same time, like, yeah, I downloaded it for my PS3 and it was free, and I didn't have a copy for the PS3 at that point, so it was great. And so no, I wouldn't be surprised if the sales continue. This is definitely one of those games that like sold so friggin' much that at this point they're just trying to get any other little bits of money they can. They'll do new DLC, so they have that. But you pay for usually a pass for all that up front. So for the most part, I think what you'll probably see is if it's not on a Game Pass type of thing, it'll be on there probably by the year's end for sure.
Yeah,
And yeah,
the quick Google search that I had a couple of headlines that say that it's either on there now or coming soon, but I can't find dates in either of the articles. And right now, you can get it on Xbox One, and I think it's like regular, it's half price right now.
yeah,
5 days remaining on the sale, and it said that it was on Xbox Game Pass. But I mean, I would check it before if people are interested in Borderlands 3, just check Game Pass before you buy it, just in case it has actually hit that point where it's available, because it just looks really fun. I should be playing it on my new PC. I'm surprised I didn't just buy it when it first came out. But again, like I was just super into Minecraft and Satisfactory at the time, and No Man's Sky was the other thing that was kind of consuming. I only have so much time to play video games. Like I can't play everything that comes out. So
yeah, for sure.
but when I do play shooters, that's been the shooter that I've been in the mood for like the last several years. I don't think there's been any other shooter that I've played. Like I'm not a Call of Duty guy. Like I'm not into any of that kind of stuff.
That's true.
I just like the cartoony. And I like Borderlands 3 is funny, or Borderlands in general. The Borderlands universe is funny. Like it's
Yeah, I agree.
the kind of stuff that the little guys shout at you when they're coming at you with a wrench. He's like, "What did he just call me?"
Get out of here.
Yeah, like
I'm gonna ride my meat bicycle. And then sometimes they're like, I'll make your head filled with poo or something. You're like, these don't make any sense. But
yeah, but they're pretty
yeah,
funny. Yeah.
they have a lot of good world building. Whether or not you get to 3 or not, I will save some of the interesting, cool stuff they do with expanding the universe. But it's definitely one of those series where, as a completionist, I had to tell myself, "You'll play this game again. Don't do every single side quest this time, like you did the very first time you ever played Borderlands. Because the second time you play it, you're going to be like, oh, that's that one side quest, and I think that one's boring. I'll skip it.
Right.
Like that's cool too. But then I want to give myself just a little bit of replayability of the main stuff besides a new character.
Yeah.
And the third one's cool because it has your character talk more out loud. Like you're not sort of the more silent protagonist that you've had from the other games. And yeah, the lore of the world really blows up in a way that, as somebody who's played now all of the games that are main, including pre-sequel and Tales from the Borderlands, which is the only like point and click adventure type game, which is also phenomenal and also is very canon because there's some stuff that happens in there that's reflected. But again, it's just one of those series where it's like, take what you want, leave what you want. For the most part, they'll give you a good enough situation or setup for you kind of know what you're doing. And every time you're going in as a new quote unquote vault hunter, so the person they're giving you kind of has to be brought up to speed with who Lilith is, who Claptrap is, you know. So you kind of get some rehash early, but every game now they bring in elements faster for the most part. Like in 3, you get your special skill right at level 2, whereas in the first game it was 5, and the second game it was 3. And so now to have your skill at level 2 almost feels like, man, I was a loser back then. Now I'm like popping people. I'm like boo 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 boo, you know. So that stuff's cool.
What character did you play, or what style?
My very first character, going into it, I told myself I had never full gamed a Siren. And Amara seemed exactly the type of siren I would love. She's got like sleeveless coat. She's like got like, you know, she melee stuff. But for the most part, the cool thing about Borderlands 3 is every character has the 3 skill trees, but at the top of the skill tree is usually a skill that you can constantly shift between without resetting all your skills. So for Amara, what's cool is she can switch from grabbing people to shooting out a version of herself in a line to jumping up and slamming the ground with power. So I've really, really enjoyed her. And then I've started, without finishing the full game, which is my problem too, but I've started the mech warrior Maz as well, who is also equally really fun to jump in her giant mech and just like down, and then that stuff's really cool.
I'm a sniper when I play when I play first person shooters. I tend to hang back and try to pick off the bigger enemies and just do like the powerful shots and things like that. So I think my character on the first and second playthrough for Borderlands 2 was Zero,
Yeah, I
the
figured. Yeah.
the lanky sniper dude. So is there like a sniper class in Borderlands 3, or is it?
What's they really tried hard to more blend them. Like the sneaky part about Maz, for instance, is she's a mech. So you think, oh, she'll be exactly like Roland and Exton, and Wilhelm, who are mech people. But she jumps into her mech, and then because of it, she has two guns. So you essentially gun Zerk, which is what Sal did, the gun Zerker in Borderlands 2. So they sort of mesh different things more. Also, I would say all the different, well, for the most part, I would say if you're a sniper, you want to do one of two people. Actually, you either want to be Zane, who can make a digiclone like other people have done, and then warp between the two digiclones. He can also make a little drone that flies around and kills people, or he can make like a barrier, just like a giant shield.
Right.
And he's got some skills for that, and some grenade mods and whatnot. Then the other person who you're more likely to play as is Flak, who's a beastmaster. So you constantly have a creature from the world of Borderlands as like your little buddy who runs around, and they'll attack things. And as his build is concerned, he does give a cloaking ability, and he also gives a lot of mods to aiming, handling, and crit. So he's probably the best sniper class overall.
And of course, like with everything, it all depends on what gun you want to use. Because there's lots of times with Zero where like a sniper rifle just is not the best choice, and you have to use the rocket launcher or a machine gun or something like that. And it's they're visually and from an exploration standpoint, I've always just loved the whole loot and shoot part of Borderlands. Like it's like, this is a cool gun. I wonder what's in that chest over there.
Yeah, exactly. You're never satisfied.
I kind of want to know, because like this is cool and all, but if I can light people on fire and blow their head off, then hey, why not, right? That sounds out of context, not the easiest thing to wrap your head around, but yeah, it's I do feel the need to have a more of an action paced video game. Like dealing with Minecraft Dungeons has been great because it's very combat focused. There's no puzzle solving. There's no creative stuff. It's just basically there's a lot of skeletons and a lot of zombies. Hack your way to the other side of this room, please and thank you. Okay, bye. Like, so that's been very satisfying. So doing something like Borderlands where there's some humor and some story, but also mostly it's just like combat fight stuff, I think would be a satisfying playthrough. That brings us into the Internet Minute, which is brought to you by you, dear patron. The Internet Minute is a section where I like to thank everybody for supporting the show. The Citadel Cafe is 100% listener supported. If you get value out of the show, please consider putting a little bit of value back into it. You can become a member at patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe. Joining at any level will get you an invite to the member-only Discord server, and there are multiple levels to choose from with different rewards like bonus episodes and Discord roles, etc. Checking in on, I think it was yesterday I checked last, and we have one more patron. We have a new patron this month, so we are now +1 from March into April. So thank you so much. That's fantastic. That doesn't, however, mean that you can't take advantage of the bonus episodes, which are now available to every tier. Usually they are locked to the barista cut level, or the cafe barista level, but because everyone is spending a lot of time at home, I thought I would just unlock them for everyone that decides to support the show. You can get access to all the 2020 barista cuts, which are the bonus conversations I have with the guests on the show most of the time, not every week, but like it's at least once a month we'll have a bonus show go out. It's not really an internet pick, and it's something I've been reading. I've not finished it, so it's not like a full review, but I do want to recommend World of Warcraft Chronicle Volume 2. It's by Chris Metzen, Matt Burns, and Robert Brooks. I received this for Christmas from my mom. It was a fantastic gift. I just haven't had a chance to really crack into it until recently, where I've been spending a lot of time in the beautiful weather we get sometimes on weekends now on my deck. I was actually reading Sunday in a pair of shorts out of my back patio, which was fantastic. I'll have links to Amazon and Goodreads for people that want to check this out. It's hardcover. It's 203 pages, so it's not small. And it's a big coffee table book. Like it's a good 13 by 11 inches. And it's got illustrated chapter headers with like concept art and illustrations of the events that are happening in throughout the course of time, and a lot of maps. And the maps change throughout time. So I find that really helpful. Like you get to see what the world looked like at this point and what the world looked like at that point as it was shaped. And where this starts and how they hinge the tales of these volumes. This is the second of 3 volumes that are currently out right now. The first volume was very much about kind of like the universe at large and the pantheon of gods and titans that are shaping the universe, and how Sargeras fell to the demons, and all this kind of stuff. And so it was really interesting to see that kind of like balance of energies and natural energies and life and void and darkness and all that kind of stuff in the first book. But they always hinge everything on the Dark Portal, which is, of course, a huge event in Warcraft history and lore, which is how the orcs got from Draenor to Azeroth, and thus igniting the orcs versus humans kind of conflict that started with even the original RTS games. They treat that like we treat BC. So BC, AD, how we have years, and how we map history,
Yes.
is also how they map history in these chronicles. But they say 3,000 years before the Dark Portal, 1,500 years before the Dark Portal, that kind of stuff. So some of the first book is like, 50,000 or 500,000 years, or ages before the Dark Portal, before it really mattered, Now in the volume 2, I'm getting into like, 600 or 700 years before the Dark Portal. I'm down to like less than 100 years now. Orcs exist in the history that I'm reading right now. But the history is all about Draenor, which I knew nothing about. It's not Azeroth. It's focusing on Draenor in the first like 4 chapters of this book. And so it's been really cool. And to kind of give a quick summation of the kind of things that you'll read, they're like Wikipedia articles. Like it's not a novel. It's just like this reference book of tales, and how this thing came to be. Think about like tales of like the Iliad, or myths and legends and things. And so Agramar, who was once the not sidekick, but like the what's the word I'm looking for? Like a Padawan, I guess, to Sargeras. He's a Titan. He comes across this world Draenor, and he's curious about it because it seems to have this weird kind of like dominance by the spore mounds. The planet has this unusual amount of life energy in it, and so all the plants are basically sentient, and the network goes planet wide, and it's eventually going to kill the planet. And Agramar can see this, and he's like, if we don't keep these spore mounds in check, eventually they're going to drain the life of the planet. The 4 elements, earth, air, fire, water, will be out of sync and destroyed, and then the planet is just going to die, and we can't have that happen. I believe I don't know whether this planet has a soul or not. That's a thing in Warcraft, but it's basically he realizes like, okay, I can't let this planet die. This is not balance. This is
usually bad.
Yeah. I'm a Titan. I'm a god. I thrive on order and balance, and this planet is out of balance by these sentient plants that are basically just going to destroy themselves along with everybody else. So he creates Grond, which is a colossal giant made from energy that Agramar sweeps up from the planet and focuses into a mountain, the largest mountain on Draenor. And the mountain comes alive, stands up with like volcano and ash and lava coming out of it, and basically goes to war, as I bang my mic, against the spore mounds, and ultimately fails, killing some, but not quite finishing the job. But when the battle is over, these dead spore mounds and Grond, who has fallen, bits of these giant mythical creatures, these colossal beings, bleed into the earth, bleed into the surface of Draenor, and warp plant life, warp animal life, create new life. And so you get this chain of like the children of Grond, and how they eventually evolve. And this is what most of the chapter is about. And it's really cool because you've got Grond, who eventually fell, and his remains spring up other creatures like the Colossals. And the Colossals still have a sense of order and justice that were bestowed on them from Agramar creating Grond. And so they go to war against the remaining spore mounds, and eventually they sacrifice themselves and save the day. But when they die, bits of them fall into the earth, and then the Magnaron are born, and they're smaller versions of the Colossals, and then essentially they are weakened by organics, and some of them fall, some of them don't, some of them are mutated, and then you get the Gron, and the Gron are again smaller, less magical, less powerful than the Magnaron, but are also commanding the jungles, and they're basically the biggest thing going. And this goes on for generations and over time and time again as Gron fall or Gron are corrupted by organics, they become Orgron. Orgron become ogres. Ogres become orcs. So basically, as the blood of Grond and the stone beings are corrupted by organic matter and become weaker and weaker and weaker, they essentially become flesh beings. And then you get, humanoid orcs. I just thought it was the coolest way to explain where orcs come from, but it's done in such a concise manner. That's a Cole's Notes version, but it's so fun to read about these characters that I've interacted with in the World of Warcraft, and people know a lot about just kind of pop culture wise. To hear about the fact that they're born from mountains, essentially, right? And essentially their corrupted stone is where these orcs come from, and that's why they're so big, why they're so strong, why they're so resilient. It's just a really interesting kind of way of approaching that kind of stuff. It's like this really cool mix between magic, religion, and evolution, all happening at the same time. Like they all exist,
Oh,
so
yeah, that's true.
they all have to influence things, and then you'll also have like subgenres of orcs. Like there's orcs that live underground, and there's orcs that live on the surface and up north, and they all have different characteristics based on their surroundings because of the nature and how they were made and how they adapt to their world. That's how they basically adapt to their surroundings as a species, which is really cool. And then the following chapters go on to explore the Draenei and all the other characters and things. So I'm on to a different part now, but that's the recent kind of like chapter or chapters that I have completed in the book. And if you're looking for something that's easy to pick up and put down, spending a lot of time at home, but maybe you don't get much more than 45 minutes to yourself, sort of deal. You're not gonna feel like pulled into a plot and then lose yourself if you can't keep going and you have to reread stuff. Like some of the stories are only a half a page long. It's just a matter of like, Agrimar then gathered all the wind and the sand and the dust and the lightning and created Grond, and Grond was this. And that's the end of the story. And then the next story is like Grond versus the Spore Mound. So then you get to hear the next part. And they're connected, but they're not long-winded, unlike me. And so it's a really, really cool way to explore the world. Obviously more rewarding if you've played World of Warcraft or if you're a fan of that genre or that game. But I would say accessible to just about anybody that likes fantasy world building. They're really, really cool books. I highly recommend them.
Yeah, I've always thought that once Emerson's old enough, I will be such a loser nerd that I will probably peruse her history textbook and be like, oh, this is kind of interesting to me now. Like, whereas before I loathed reading it. And to be fair, textbooks have no real cool narrative to it. But this sounds like basically a World of Warcraft textbook.
It is.
And I know
yeah.
that doesn't sound exciting, but once you really think about it, if it's something you're interested in, you'll read the hell out of a whole history. Any collected shorts, like Pottermore is essentially J.K. Rowling's Encyclopedia Britannica, and you're just reading a bunch of entries. But if somebody said go read the Encyclopedia Britannica, you'd be like, no way, I'm not that loose. And I'm not that big of a dork. But like you're like, well, if it was Harry Potter, and if you were World of Warcraft, you probably would. Yeah, exactly.
And that's where this is. And the cool thing now is that because World of Warcraft has been around for like 10 or 15 years now, if you want to Google it, like I was like, I sort of want to know what a Gron and an Orgron looks like, because like the way that the book is describing them, they feel like larger than life. It's like I don't remember ever encountering anything in the game that was like that big. Orcs and ogres, yes, but then Orgron is like, I'm sure I've seen one, but did I know what it was when I saw it in the game? And because now the game has got the Warlords of Draenor and a couple of other expansions, they've had to kind of design that kind of stuff. And so I don't necessarily think it's the Gron and the Orgron as they are described in this book, but you're seeing what the descendants of those creatures would look like in the game. So you can kind of get an idea, because it says like the Gron are supposed to be like these crazy huge things that tower over the jungles. And the Gron in what I saw when I looked it up is like, well, they're big. Like they're like 4, 5, 6 times the size of a player, but they're not like mountains, you know.
Yeah.
But that could just be that, over the millennia they've just shrunk as they don't have the need to be that big. Like a lot of the reason for the size of some of these colossals were because they were pieces falling off of something so big. They were just big themselves anyway. But at the time, they also had this colossal enemy in the spore mounds and the genosaurs and these other like organic things, which were essentially their equal. So you couldn't make smaller versions of yourself and send them off to war against these giant plant monsters. Like you kind of had to be just as big and just as bad. And until that conflict was over, then everything was just big. But once the conflict was over and the spore mounds, and I can't remember the name of it, like there's a worldwide plant network on Draenor, and they called it something, and I can't remember what it was called, the undergrowth or the evergrowth or something. And once that is gone, then there's no reason to constantly be in battle with it. And then you start to see tribes form, and that's when everything starts to get small and segregated, and cultures start to evolve. It's really neat. It's a really, really fun read. That wraps up this episode of the Citadel Cafe. You can get more info about the show and links to some of the things that Brockett and I talked about at thecitadelcafe.com. Music for the show was, of course, composed by Kevin MacLeod. You can email the show at thecitadelcafe@gmail.com or find us by name on Twitter and Facebook. Subscribe on iTunes, Android, Stitcher, and Spotify. And I buried the lead. You can also subscribe on YouTube. We have the archive is now 100% up on YouTube from episode 300 on to including this episode. So if YouTube is where you like to hang your podcast hat, then you can subscribe on YouTube as well. Word of mouth is, of course, the easiest way to support the show. Normally, I say poke a friend in the arm, but I'm going to say wave across the street and shout because of social distancing. Either way, recommend the show to friends. The more ear holes and eyeballs we have on the Citadel Cafe, the better the podcast will do in the future. My name is Joel Duggan. You can find everything I am doing online, including my illustration and design portfolio at joelduggan.com. If you're interested in hiring me, then just drop me a line there. Check out my other podcast all about Minecraft at thespawnchunks.com. You can also follow me at Joel Duggan on social media, and I'm going to point you towards Twitch, where, fingers crossed, I will be returning to streaming something if I can get the graphic issues on my PC fixed. Brockett, where can people find you and King George online?
Oh, you can check out the Cat Volver, CATVOLVER at the Cat Volver. That's what I do for Instagram. Trying to link it to Twitter as well for different things, and it should be the Cat Volver on Twitter as well.
You've been listening to the Citadel Cafe, where we are fast, easy, and cheap, but you can only pick two.